My inheritance disappeared, until I saw who took it. Some wounds cut so deep, they redefine your understanding of pain itself. Those were the words that echoed through my mind as I sat in that sterile conference room, staring at documents that would change everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and the people I'd trusted most in this world. My name is Cordelia Blackthorne, and this is the story of how I discovered that blood doesn't always run thicker than greed. The mahogany conference table gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of Whitmore and Associates, casting shadows that seemed to dance with an ominous energy. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair as Mr. Whitmore shuffled through his papers with the practiced efficiency of a man who had delivered both good news and heartbreak with equal measure for over 3 decades. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "We're here for the reading of Eleanor Blackthorne's last will and testament." Grandmother Eleanor. Even 3 weeks after her funeral, saying her name felt like pressing on a fresh bruise. She had been the cornerstone of our family, the woman who had built the Blackthorne textile empire from nothing more than a single sewing machine and an iron will that could bend steel. I glanced around the table at my siblings. Maximilian sat to my right, his perfectly pressed suit giving him the appearance of someone who belonged in a boardroom rather than a family meeting. At 28, he was 2 years my senior and had always carried himself with the confidence of someone who expected the world to bend to his will. Across from me, Genevieve adjusted her diamond bracelet nervously. At 24, she was the youngest of us 3, but she had always possessed a sharp intelligence that could cut through pretense like a blade through silk. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her green eyes held a tension I couldn't quite identify. "To Maximilian Blackthorne," Mr. Whitmore read, "I leave my collection of first edition books and the sum of $500,000. Max's face remained impassive, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. He had expected more, we all knew that. "To Genevieve Blackthorne, I leave my jewelry collection and the sum of $500,000. Jen's hand moved unconsciously to her throat, and I saw her swallow hard. "And to Cordelia Blackthorne," Mr. Whitmore continued, his voice taking on a warmer tone, "I leave the remainder of my estate, including my controlling interest in Blackthorne Industries, my properties and all associated assets." The words hit me like a physical force. Grandmother had chosen me to carry on her life's work. The textile factories, the international distribution networks, the research and development facilities. It was all mine. I looked at my siblings, expecting to see surprise, perhaps even happiness for me. Instead, I saw something that made my stomach clench with unease. Max's jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists. Jen's face had gone pale, and her green eyes held a coldness I had never seen before. "There is one condition," Mr. Whitmore added. "Eleanor has stipulated that Cordelia must take active control of the company within 30 days of this reading, or the inheritance will be redistributed equally among all 3 grandchildren." As we prepared to leave, Max stood and straightened his tie. "Congratulations, Cordelia," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Grandmother clearly saw something special in you." There was something in his tone that made me look at him more carefully. "Thank you, Max. I hope we can work together." "Of course," he replied, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Family comes first after all." 3 days after the will reading, I was surrounded by boxes of documents when my phone rang. Max's name showed on the caller ID. "Cordy, we need to talk." "Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street? 20 minutes later, I found Max inside the weathered brick building that had served as one of our storage facilities, standing among towers of fabric bolts. His usually pristine appearance was disheveled, his tie loose, his hair mussed. "Max, what's wrong?" He turned to face me, and I was shocked to see that his hands were shaking. "Cordelia, I need you to know that what I'm about to tell you, I never wanted things to go this far." A cold dread began to seep into my bones. "What are you talking about?" "The inheritance. It's not going to happen. It can't happen." He looked around as if expecting someone to emerge from behind the stacked merchandise. "The company is in trouble, Cordy. Serious financial trouble. I felt my world tilt off its axis. What kind of trouble? Bad investments, outstanding loans, contracts that went south. Grandmother had been propping up the business with her personal assets for the past 2 years, but even that wasn't enough. He met my eyes, and I saw genuine anguish there. The inheritance you think you're getting. Most of it doesn't exist anymore. My legs felt suddenly weak. That's impossible. I've seen the financial statements. The statements were altered. Max's voice was barely above a whisper. Grandmother asked me to help her hide the extent of the losses. She was trying to protect the family reputation. He showed me documents on his phone, bank statements and legal documents with staggering numbers. Loans from multiple banks, unpaid invoices, tax liabilities that stretched back months. If genuine, Blackthorn Industries wasn't just in trouble, it was on the verge of complete collapse. There is one option, Max said finally. I've been in talks with Harrison Textiles. They're interested in acquiring our customer base and equipment. It wouldn't cover all the debt, but it would be something. Harrison Textiles, our biggest competitor, known for prioritizing profit over quality and treating workers poorly. The thought of grandmother's life work ending up in their hands made me physically ill. I need time to process this, Max. I understand, but we don't have much time. The creditors are starting to circle. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about Max's revelation felt wrong. Grandmother had never been careless, and the idea that she would allow the company to fall into such dire straits didn't align with the woman I had known and loved. The next day, I went to Blackthorn Industries headquarters. Martha Henley, grandmother's longtime secretary, looked up as I approached. Cordelia, dear, I wasn't expecting you today. I wanted to start reviewing some of grandmother's business records. Martha's expression grew troubled. Oh, honey, I'm afraid that won't be possible. Mr. Maximilian came by yesterday with instructions to pack up all of Mrs. Eleanor's personal business files. He had a moving company here first thing this morning. They cleared out her entire office. My stomach dropped. He took the files. Between you and me, I thought it was strange. Usually, these things take weeks to organize, but he seemed to be in quite a hurry. My next stop was First National Bank. Mrs. Rodriguez, the bank manager, greeted me with obvious sympathy. Miss Blackthorn, I'm in the process of taking over the family business, and I need to review the current status of our accounts. She turned to her computer, and I watched her face carefully as she accessed the files. Her eyebrows drew together in confusion. Miss Blackthorn, I'm showing that the primary business account was closed yesterday. The remaining funds were transferred out by check. Closed. My voice came out as barely a whisper. By whom? According to my records, the account was closed by Maximilian Blackthorn. How much was transferred? She hesitated. The account had a balance of nearly $2 million when it was closed. $2 million. If the company was truly in debt as Max claimed, why would there be $2 million sitting in a business account? My phone buzzed with a text from Jen. Can you meet me for coffee? I have something important to discuss with you. 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from my sister in a small cafe. Genevieve looked nervous. Her usually perfect composure cracked around the edges. Jen, what's going on? She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Cordy, I need to tell you something about Max. I saw him at lunch yesterday with someone from Harrison Textiles, and they were going over documents. I overheard part of their conversation. They were talking about accelerating the timeline, about making sure everything was finalized before you could interfere. The words hit me like a physical blow. Before I could interfere. Cordy, I think Max is planning something. Something that doesn't include you having any say in what happens to grandmother's business. I told her about my conversation with Max and what I had discovered at the bank. With each detail, Jen's expression grew more troubled. Oh my God, she whispered. Cordy, what if he's stealing the inheritance? The possibility crystallized into a terrible certainty. Max hadn't been trying to protect me from bad news. He had been manipulating me, setting up an elaborate deception to steal what grandmother had intended for me to inherit. We need proof, I said. If Max is really doing what we think he's doing, we need to stop him. The storage facility, Jen said immediately. He mentioned it to me yesterday. It's the one on Industrial Boulevard. Can you find out which unit? I can do better than that. I can get us inside. That evening, Jen and I sat in her car outside the storage facility, watching the last daylight fade. The complex was larger than expected, with dozens of identical blue buildings stretching across several acres. Are you sure about this? Yes. We're not going to get caught, Jen interrupted. And even if we do, we're family. We have as much right to those documents as Max does. At 10 o'clock we made our move. Jen had somehow acquired the gate code and we drove through until we found building 247. The storage unit was secured with a heavy padlock, but Jen produced tools that looked suspiciously like lockpicks. Jewelry-making class, she explained with a shrug. You learn about working with small metal tools. Inside the unit, we found dozens of boxes and filing cabinets from grandmother's office. After about an hour of searching, Jen called out from the far corner. Cordelia, you need to see this. She was holding a thick folder labeled, Confidential Financial Records. 2024. Inside were bank statements showing that Blackthorn Industries had been profitable throughout the entire year. Not just profitable, thriving. The most recent statement showed a balance of over $3 million in the primary business account alone. There were loan documents, but they weren't for the company. They were personal loans that Max had taken out using forged documentation. I found applications for lines of credit, all fraudulent, all designed to create paper trails that would make it look as though Blackthorn Industries was drowning in debt it had never actually incurred. Jen, look at this. I showed her transfers from the company accounts to various offshore entities. Max has been moving money out of the business for months. By creating false records showing the company in distress, he could convince me to agree to a quick sale to Harrison Textiles, a sale handled through a shell company he had created. The majority of the proceeds would disappear into his private accounts. There's more, I said, finding another folder labeled Harrison Acquisition. Inside were detailed plans for the sale, complete with inflated debt figures and communications between Max and Harrison executives that made it clear this had been in the works for months. Then I found one more folder that stopped me cold. Eleanor Final Arrangements. Inside were copies of several wills, including what appeared to be a final version that had never been filed with the attorney. This final will was dated just 3 days before grandmother's death, dividing her estate equally among all 3 grandchildren. But there was a note attached in grandmother's handwriting. If anything should happen to me before this will can be properly executed, please know that I have discovered concerning irregularities in the company finances. I believe one of my grandchildren may be attempting to steal from the business. I am changing my will to protect all 3 of them equally, as I can no longer be certain which one can be trusted. E. Blackthorn. Jen, I whispered, showing her the note. What if Max didn't just steal the inheritance? What if grandmother's death wasn't natural? My sister's face went white. Cordelia, don't say that. But the pieces were falling into place. Grandmother had discovered Max's scheme. She had been in the process of protecting us by changing her will. And then, suddenly, she had died of what the doctors called a heart attack, just 3 days before she could file her new will. As we hastily repacked what we could and prepared to leave, I heard footsteps outside the storage unit. Jen and I froze as someone approached the door. The roll-up door began to rise with a metallic grinding noise. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the security lights, was Max. Well, well, Max said, his voice carrying a coldness I had never heard before. I thought I might find you here, Cordelia. He stepped into the storage unit with 2 large men in dark clothing flanking him. This wasn't going to be a family discussion. Max, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to talk. I think we're past the point of talking. He gestured to the documents scattered around us. It looks like you've been doing quite a bit of reading. Jen stepped closer to me. Max, what's going on? Who are these men? Insurance. I've invested considerable time and energy into this project, and I can't have my dear sisters interfering with the final stages. Project. I couldn't keep the disgust out of my voice. Is that what you call murdering our grandmother? Max's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes, a brief moment of surprise that confirmed my worst suspicions. Now, Cordelia, that's quite an accusation. Grandmother died of natural causes. Doctors who never performed an autopsy. Doctors who had no reason to suspect anything other than heart failure. You're being dramatic. Her heart was fine, Max. But this isn't about her health, is it? I held up the note. This is about the fact that she discovered what you were doing. For the first time, Max's composure cracked. Give me that. Why? So you can destroy the evidence like you destroyed everything else. You don't understand what it's like to be the oldest, to be expected to succeed, to carry on the family name, only to watch grandmother choose someone else as her successor. So you decided to steal what you couldn't earn. I decided to take what should have been mine by right. The mask slipped completely. I'm the eldest son, Cordelia. For generations, the Blackthorn legacy has passed to the eldest male heir. But grandmother had to break with tradition and give everything to her precious granddaughter. This was never about the money. This was about your wounded pride. It was about justice. And now, thanks to your meddling, it's about survival. One of the men stepped forward, metal glinting in his hand. Jen gasped and grabbed my arm. Max, please, she whispered. We're family. I'm afraid it's too late for that, Genevieve. Cordelia has seen too much, and now so have you. You can't be serious. I want you to know that I didn't plan for it to go this far. The original idea was much simpler. But grandmother had to be suspicious, had to start asking questions. So you killed her. Max was quiet for a long moment. It was remarkably easy, actually. A small injection of potassium chloride while she slept. Mimics a heart attack perfectly. And it's virtually undetectable unless someone knows exactly what to look for. Jen made a small, choked sound beside me. She never suspected a thing, Max continued. Right up until the end, she believed I was the devoted grandson. She even thanked me for staying so late that night to help her organize some files. You monster, Jen whispered. I'm a pragmatist. Grandmother was going to ruin everything with her sentimentality. She was going to divide the estate equally, which would have made it impossible for any of us to maintain control of the company. What about Jen? She doesn't know anything about your real plans. She's seen the documents, heard our conversation. I can't trust her to keep quiet. She's your sister. And you're both threats to my future. Max nodded to the two men, and they began to move toward us. That's when Jen surprised me. My younger sister grabbed a crowbar that had been leaning against one of the filing cabinets and swung it with surprising force at the nearest man's knee. He went down with a howl, and Jen grabbed my hand. There's a door back here, she said urgently. The second man was advancing, but Jen swung the crowbar again, forcing him to back away. We burst through a small emergency exit into the alley behind the building and ran into the night. My car, Jen gasped as we ran. It's parked on the other side of the complex. We managed to stay ahead of our pursuers by weaving between buildings. When we reached Jen's vehicle, I was amazed to see she had left the engine running. Where are we going? She asked as we sped away. The police station, I said, but Jen shook her head. Not yet. We need to make sure we have everything we need to make them believe us. Max is charming and well-connected. We need to be absolutely certain we can prove what he's done. She was right. We needed more than just financial documents and a handwritten note. There's somewhere we need to go first, I said, thinking of the one place that might contain the final piece of evidence. Grandmother Eleanor's house sat on a hill overlooking the city, its Victorian architecture silhouetted against the starlit sky. I had spent countless hours here as a child, and returning now under these circumstances filled me with grief and determination. The house had been sealed by the estate attorneys, but I still had my key. We let ourselves in through the kitchen door, using our phone flashlights to navigate the familiar rooms. "What exactly are we looking for?" Jen whispered. "Insurance." If grandmother suspected Max was up to something, she would have protected herself somehow. I went directly to grandmother's study, remembering how she had always been protective of certain drawers. That's when I noticed something odd. One of the drawers appeared to be slightly ajar, as if it had been forced open. "Cordelia," Jen said urgently. "Look at this." She was holding a small brass key and what appeared to be a letter from the jewelry box on the bookshelf. "The letter is addressed to you," Jen said. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. "My dearest Cordelia, if you are reading this, then something has happened to me, and my suspicions about Maximilian have proven justified. I have discovered that he has been embezzling money from the company, creating false records to cover his tracks. In the locked drawer of my desk, use the key I have left with this letter, you will find copies of the real financial records and evidence of Max's fraudulent activities. I have also hidden a recording device in my bedroom, behind the family photograph on my nightstand. I have changed my will to reflect my concerns about Max's trustworthiness. The new will is hidden in my bedroom safe, behind the painting of your grandfather. The combination is your birthday, 0425. All my love, Grandmother Eleanor." "The recording device," I said to Jen. "We need to get to her bedroom." Behind the family photograph on the nightstand was a small digital recording device. I found the playback button and held my breath as I pressed it. Then I heard grandmother's voice. "Max, I wasn't expecting you so late. Is everything all right?" "Hello, grandmother. I wanted to discuss some business matters with you." "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" There was a pause, and when Max spoke again, his voice was harder, more direct. "I know you've been looking into the company finances, grandmother. I know you've discovered the discrepancies." "Max, why would you steal from your own family?" "Because it should have been mine to begin with. Everything you built should pass to me, not to some sentimental notion about gender equality. The business will go to whoever is most capable of running it, Max. And right now that's Cordelia. Cordelia doesn't have the backbone for what it takes to succeed. You're going to transfer controlling interest in the company to me, grandmother. Tonight. I have the papers right here. I will do no such thing." "I think you will. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to take more drastic action. And I really would prefer not to hurt you." "You're threatening me. Max, you're my grandson. Love you. How did we come to this? Sign the papers, grandmother. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "No." What followed was a struggle, evident from the sounds of furniture being moved and grandmother's increasingly labored breathing. Then Max's voice, calm and clinical. "I'm sorry it came to this, grandmother. I really am. But you left me no choice." The recording continued, capturing Max staging the scene to look like a natural death. At one point, he seemed to be talking to himself. "Heart attack. That's what they'll say. Poor old woman, probably brought on by stress from discovering financial irregularities. So tragic." Jen and I listened in horrified silence. When it finally ended, we sat in the darkness, processing what we had just heard. "We have him," Jen whispered. "We finally have him." I carefully removed the recording device and found the revised will in the safe. This version divided everything equally among the 3 grandchildren, but with provisions to prevent any one of us from gaining complete control. It included detailed explanations of her reasoning and provisions for an immediate forensic audit of the company finances. "She was still trying to protect us," I said, feeling tears begin to flow. "Even when she knew one of us had betrayed her, she was still trying to look out for all of us." But as we prepared to leave, I heard car doors slamming in the driveway. "He's here," Jen whispered, peering out the window. "Max is here, and he's got more men with him." I looked out and saw at least 4 figures moving toward the house. We made our way carefully through the dark house, but as we reached the ground floor, I heard Max's voice. "Cordelia. Genevieve. I know you're here. Your car is in the driveway." We crept toward the library and managed to climb through a tall window into the side garden. From there, we could make our way to the woods that bordered grandmother's property. But as we dropped to the ground, I heard footsteps on gravel behind us. "Going somewhere, ladies?" We turned to find Max standing at the corner of the house, flanked by 2 associates. In the moonlight, his face looked haggard and desperate. "It's over, Max," I said. "We have everything. The financial records, grandmother's letter, the recording of you confessing to her murder. Nothing is over until I say it's over. Give me what you found, and maybe we can still work something out." "Work something out?" Jen laughed bitterly. "You murdered our grandmother, Max. There's nothing to work out." She was an obstacle standing in the way of progress, clinging to outdated ideas about loyalty and family. She was a person. She was our grandmother, and she loved you. Love doesn't pay the bills, Cordelia. Love doesn't build empires. Love is a weakness that successful people learn to overcome. I stared at this stranger who wore my brother's face and realized that whatever had once made him human had died long ago. "You're sick," Jen said quietly. "You're genuinely sick. Save your pity. You're going to need it for yourselves." He nodded to his men, and they began to advance. But before they could reach us, the night exploded with light and sound. "FBI. Nobody move." Floodlights illuminated the entire garden, turning night into day. Agents in tactical gear emerged from positions around the property, their weapons drawn and trained on Max and his associates. "Maximilian Blackthorne," called a woman's voice. "You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and murder." Agent Sarah Martinez stepped into the light, her badge clearly visible. Behind her came several more agents. "How?" Max began, but Agent Martinez cut him off. "Your sisters contacted us several hours ago, Mr. Blackthorne. They provided us with compelling evidence of your criminal activities." I looked at Jen in confusion, but she smiled weakly. "I called them after we left the storage facility. While you were driving, I contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The recording was particularly convincing," Agent Martinez continued, approaching Max with handcuffs. "A detailed confession to murder, with your voice clearly identifiable." As they secured Max and his associates, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. We had stopped him, but at the cost of destroying our family forever. "Cordelia. Genevieve," Max called out as they led him toward a waiting vehicle. "You don't understand what you've done. I was trying to protect our legacy." I walked over to him, looking into his eyes one final time. "No, Max. You were trying to steal it. Grandmother built something beautiful based on integrity and hard work. You would have turned it into just another soulless corporation. You're naive. You'll never be able to run that business successfully." "Maybe not," I replied calmly. "But at least I'll try to do it with honor." 6 months later, I sat in what had once been Grandmother Eleanor's office, now redecorated but still carrying the essence of her vision. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating plans for our new sustainable textile line spread across my desk. The forensic audit had confirmed everything we suspected. Max had embezzled over $4 million using sophisticated financial manipulations. The money had been recovered, and the company's finances were stronger than they had been in years. The legal proceedings had been complex, but grandmother's final will, the one that divided the estate equally, had been authenticated and honored. Jen and I had agreed to consolidate our shares, giving us joint control while setting aside Max's portion in a trust for charity. Max was awaiting trial for murder and fraud. His lawyers were pushing for a plea deal, but Agent Martinez had told me they had overwhelming evidence. "Knock, knock," came Jen's voice from the doorway. I looked up to see my sister with 2 cups of coffee and a smile. She had decided to take a more active role in the company, using her artistic background to help develop innovative designs. "How are the new worker housing plans coming along?" she asked. "Better than expected. We should be able to break ground next month. Grandmother always said that a company's greatest asset is its people. She'd be proud of what you're doing here." "What we're doing?" I nodded, feeling the familiar ache of missing grandmother Eleanor. But it was a gentler sorrow now. Not the sharp grief of betrayal and loss, but the quieter sadness of missing someone who had lived fully and left a meaningful legacy. "I got a letter from Max yesterday," Jen said quietly. I looked up sharply. "What did he want?" "To apologize, he says. He wants to see us." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you first." I considered the question carefully. Part of me was curious about what Max might have to say. But a larger part knew that some betrayals were too deep to forgive. "I think we need to focus on the future. On honoring grandmother's memory and building something positive from what he tried to destroy." Jen nodded slowly. "I think you're right. Some doors are better left closed." We sat in comfortable silence, looking out at the city where grandmother Eleanor had built her empire with determination and integrity. In the distance, I could see construction crews working on the new community center we were funding, and beyond that, the school where we had established a scholarship program. "You know what the strangest part is?" Jen said eventually. "What's that?" "I think this is what she would have wanted all along. Not the pain, not the betrayal, but the outcome. Us working together, using the business to make a positive difference in the world." I thought about that, wondering if grandmother could have somehow foreseen how events would unfold. She had always been remarkably perceptive about people's characters. "Do you think she suspected what Max was planning?" "I think she suspected something. But I don't think she could have imagined how far he would go." "But that Max was never real, was he?" "He was just a mask hiding someone capable of murder." "Maybe. Or maybe good people can become monsters when they let greed and entitlement consume them." Jen finished her coffee and stood up. "Either way, we can't change what happened. We can only control what happens next." She was right. We had spent months processing the betrayal, the grief, and the shock. But dwelling on those feelings wouldn't bring grandmother back or restore the innocence we had lost. What mattered now was ensuring that her legacy lived on in how we ran the company, treated our employees, and contributed to our community. Blackthorn Industries had survived Max's attempt to destroy it, and under our leadership, it would thrive in ways that honored everything grandmother Eleanor had stood for. As Jen left to check on the design team, I returned to my work, reviewing proposals for environmental sustainability initiatives. My attention was drawn to a photograph on my desk, the same family portrait that had once hidden grandmother's recording device. In the picture, the three of us stood behind grandmother's chair, smiling and happy, unaware of the darkness growing in Max's heart. I couldn't see any hint of the monster he would become. But perhaps that was the most important lesson. Evil doesn't always announce itself with obvious signs. Sometimes it wears a familiar face and hides behind love and family loyalty. The people who can hurt us most are often the ones we trust without reservation. I had learned to be more careful with my trust, but also not to let that caution turn into cynicism. For every Max who betrayed those who loved him, there were dozens of others who remained loyal, honest, and worthy of trust. The afternoon passed quickly as I immersed myself in work that had become both my passion and my tribute to grandmother Eleanor. By sunset, I had approved 3 new hiring initiatives, reviewed our quarterly environmental report, and scheduled meetings with potential European partners. As I prepared to leave, my assistant knocked. "Ms. Blackthorn, there's a reporter here from the Business Journal. She wants to discuss the company's recent changes." I considered turning down the interview, but realized this might be an opportunity to share grandmother's story and values. The reporter, Jessica Chen, was waiting with a digital recorder and notepad. "Ms. Blackthorn, thank you for agreeing to see me. Please call me Cordelia. It has been challenging, but also an opportunity to return to our core values. Can you tell me about your grandmother's vision for Blackthorn Industries?" I smiled, feeling warmth that always accompanied thoughts of grandmother at her best. She believed that a successful business should be a force for good in the world. Not just profitable but beneficial to its employees, community, and the environment. She used to say that making money was easy. Making a difference required real skill and commitment. And you're continuing that philosophy? Absolutely. We're implementing worker profit-sharing programs, investing in sustainable manufacturing, and using profits to fund community development. It's what she would have wanted. Jessica asked about our business practices, growth plans, and corporate responsibility. Eventually, the conversation turned to more personal matters. Your brother's trial is scheduled to begin next month. How has this affected your family's relationship with the company? My brother made choices that betrayed not only his family but everything our grandmother stood for. His actions were his own, and they don't reflect the values that built this company or the values that will guide it going forward. What would you want people to know about your grandmother's legacy? That she built something beautiful and meaningful, and that beauty wasn't diminished by one person's attempt to destroy it. Eleanor Blackthorne was a woman of integrity, compassion, and vision. She created jobs, supported her community, and treated everyone with dignity and respect. That's the legacy we're committed to continuing. After Jessica left, I remained in the conference room, thinking about the questions and answers. This interview, like so many aspects of my new role, was really about storytelling, defining what the company stood for and what it would become. For too long, Max's version of the story had dominated. Business was about ruthless competition and profit at any cost. But that wasn't grandmother Eleanor's story, and it wouldn't be mine. Our story was about second chances, about redemption, about proving that success and integrity weren't mutually exclusive. It was about honoring a remarkable woman's memory by living up to the values she had tried to instill in all of us. As I finally prepared to leave, I took one last look around the room where so much of our company's history had been written. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to prove that grandmother Eleanor's faith in me hadn't been misplaced. The inheritance I had thought I was receiving, money, property, and corporate control, had turned out to be far less important than the inheritance I had actually received. The knowledge of what it meant to build something meaningful, the strength to fight for what was right, and the wisdom to distinguish between those who deserved trust and those who merely demanded it. In the end, that was the greatest gift grandmother Eleanor had given me, and it was one that could never be stolen, forged, or taken away by betrayal. As I walked through the empty office building toward the parking garage, I felt her presence with me, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a living part of the values and principles that would guide every decision I made going forward. The shadows of greed that had nearly destroyed our family were finally lifting, replaced by the bright promise of a future built on the foundation she had laid so many years ago. And for the first time since that horrible day in Mr. Whitmore's office, I felt truly ready to carry on her work. Thank you for watching. If you want more videos like this, please like, subscribe, and share.